Hello and welcome back to another Wednesday live stream with me, Melanie. I'm a counselling psychologist, a bit of a program officer, do a few different things here at Women's Health and Wellbeing Services. And Wednesdays I live stream. You may have discovered that before or you may not. This may be your first time watching this. If you are watching this right now as I live stream on a Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. in Western Australian time, can't say that properly. You're more than welcome though to jump online and send me a message. We can do a bit of a chat if you have any questions today. Being a live stream, it is interactive if you want it to be. So you're always welcome to do that, but if not, this will be available to view back on our Facebook page. We also will link it to our website as well. So today I'm going to talk about a interesting but really important topic, quite a challenging topic, and that is supporting and managing children who are grieving, who may have experienced a loss. And this topic came about at a request from someone who asked me to cover this topic. So if you have any topics that you'd like me to talk about, to discuss, to do some research and then live stream on, do video on, let me know. Hit us up here at Women's Health and Wellbeing Services via our website, which is whws.org.au, or of course our Facebook page, Women's Health and Wellbeing Services. Send us a message that way. Give us a call, 9490-2258. Many different ways to communicate. So if you're curious about a particular topic or would like more information, by all means let us know and I can investigate that for you. Otherwise, Janet, who is our health promotion officer here, she does her live streams on Fridays and she's also covering a wide variety of topics. Mine are more mental health focused and hers are more self-care focused, but she's also able to talk on many different things as well if you have ideas. So moving on then to today. So I'm going to be talking about how to support children and teenagers who have experienced some sort of loss. So that may be a death, of course. When we think of loss and grief, we typically think of a death. But this topic also covers many other different losses. Loss of a family, if parents have divorced, if a parent has moved away, loss associated with changing school, change of a friendship group, moving house, moving state, moving city, big change, often a lot of grief and loss associated with that. Being displaced in some way, perhaps a child has gone into foster care, or maybe is coming from overseas and is a refugee. There might be a lot of trauma in the family and a lot of confusion. There's also losses associated with having an accident and acquiring a disability of some sort, or living with a chronic illness. There's sort of a loss of what you would expect to be a normal childhood. That child may, of course, be really struggling with that. And there's also the loss of a parent who might go to jail or just leaves and never kind of comes back. Also really important losses that happen, sadly, every day. And losses in children may be real, like somebody has died or something significant has changed, or it can be sort of symbolic as well, more representative in their head of a change in their world and how they kind of conceptualize that. So today I'm going to be talking probably more focused on death and how to support a child who has experienced a death. I'll be talking a little bit about that, and then going into the developmental stages of children and what you might expect from children at different developmental ages and stages in terms of what they're understanding cognitively and emotionally, and how to sort of manage that, what to look out for. Be talking a little bit about what you might expect to see in all children, the different sort of stages they may go through and may go back and forth through, and of course then how to support child or children through that. So starting with death, the ultimate kind of loss and permanent change for a child. They may have experienced the death of a parent, the death of a grandparent, the death of a sibling, a cousin, an aunt, an uncle, a pet, really big one. A teacher may have died, or the partner of a teacher, or the partner of an adult who's close to them in their little circle who has died. So it might not directly be family member or the direct person that they usually deal with, but someone close to them, and that person is affected. And even things like friends, parents who may have died as well. The thing to consider too is the nature of the death. So obviously, there are many different ways that people die. So we have to take that into account and sort of think about what that may be like for that child if we were to think about things from their point of view. Was that death expected? And what I mean by that, were they aging? Were they really ill? Were they declining in some way? And it was somewhat expected, although of course not wished for, that they were going to die, and they did. Or was the death very sudden and unexpected? Or was the death very traumatic? So in each of those situations you may find different responses. I really want to emphasize a key point in supporting children to manage and move through a death or a significant loss is how the adults around that little person or those little people are coping with that themselves. That's a really important factor. Actually, that's a factor for all of parenting, really, and all of supporting children, is the capacity and the ability of the key adults, the key carers in that child's life, including teachers here, as key attachment figures and childcare educators as well, how they are coping or not coping with that loss. I'm not saying you've got to just get your act together and just power through. Quite the opposite. Of course, you need to do your own grieving and processing of that as well. And the more you're able to get your own support to help you with your struggles through a grief, particularly if it's a very intense grief, the loss of someone very close to home, your immediate partner or immediate family member, the more support you may want or need. But it's very important that you're dealing with it, so to speak, the best that you can, so that you can be there as much as you can for your little person, and or make sure you have someone else, another adult or a few adults that are known to the child, that are trustworthy, that are caring, that are able to be stable and present during that period. Not that grief ever ends, but certainly during the early days and weeks, maybe even months, that there is someone else perhaps alongside you, particularly if you are really struggling and you're sort of bearing the brunt of the loss and the grief, that there is another person around, or a few people around, a little kind of network, a little tribe around you to support you through the grieving process, and that will enable you to support that child in your life, or the children, and that other adult, or those other adults will be able to do that as well. So the more support and sort of holding and nurturing you can have during that time, in whatever way that works for you. So I'm really mindful of not kind of saying you've just got to accept every ounce of help out there, you've got to go and seek help. No, you know yourself, you know what works for you. And if you don't, go out and try what works for you. So if talking a lot and crying and grieving a lot with close friends or close family members or your partner really works for you, do it. If it doesn't, don't do it, or do it in a small kind of way, or find another way to express that grief and to get support, whether that's maybe from some sort of more distant kind of friends, or perhaps professional help, a therapist of some sort. Grief is not a problem, though. It's not a pathology. It's or something that needs to be fixed. And grief and depression are very different. depression can occur as a result of a grieving state that is essentially unprocessed or is very traumatic or is a complex grief. That definitely can evolve into a depression and maybe some other mental health issues as well. But grief in itself is not a problem to be solved or fixed. Grief is grief, and it's going to do its own thing in its own time, whether you like it or not. And we must remember that too with our children, that it's not linear. There's no, whilst there sort of is stages and perhaps some degree of predictability, what we might expect to see in an adult and a child, doesn't mean that they're just going to go from one thing to another to another. It's quite a complex process, more so in children, which is, when I say complex, it's because it's sort of complicated by the level of understanding in a child, dependent on their age and stage and their ability to think and understand things. But the responses of the adults around them, like I've mentioned, are really important. So death, if we're talking about death, can be a difficult concept to grasp, and it's pretty difficult for a lot of adults to grasp as well. Many of us still struggle with what death is and the permanence of death, and we all have a different understanding and perhaps belief system around death, and we may, I think there's a huge kind of spectrum there in terms of I accept death, I know that it's coming, I'm at peace with it, versus total denial of death and endings kind of thing, and we can exist anywhere on that continuum, and that may change at different points in our lives. But for children, it can be, and obviously the younger the child is, it can be more complex to understand, because a person and a child needs to have an ability to think in sort of a concrete way and also an abstract way. Because when we're thinking about death, it's a far out concept. It's pretty abstract. No one's been ever able to sort of pin down what happens after death. So that requires kind of a degree of higher order thinking to be able to sort of understand this kind of bizarre notion of death, in addition to having perhaps a spiritual belief around that. Even if you have no belief, that's kind of a belief in a way, that there is nothing kind of thing. So, and often children don't have their own sort of set of beliefs yet. They may have grown up in a religious household or with certain belief systems embedded in the family, and they may have an understanding of death through that kind of religious and cultural framework kind of thing, and that may or may not help kind of thing. So the concepts of death that can be really challenging for a child to understand are, I'm going to list a few here: the irreversibility of death. What I mean by this is that obviously it can't be reversed. When somebody dies, there's no coming back. They're gone. Or when an animal dies, they're not going to suddenly start breathing again in a few days. Their heart's not going to start beating. And in understanding that irreversibility, a child has to understand too, and may struggle to understand that, of course, that no matter what they do, it's not going to bring that person, that loved one, that animal back. And that can be really tricky for children. And children can sometimes go into a bit of a struggle in their heads and a bit of a bargaining around that, in terms of, if I'm really good, my parent's going to come back. Or slip into feelings of guilt. Guilt can be very, very significant for children and teenagers, and of course adults, in relation to death. My parent died, I'm going to use that example. My parent died because I was bad, because I did the wrong thing, or because I thought this certain thing, or because I played with this toy when I wasn't supposed to. Some really kind of magical thinking, we would call that, and that they're kind of engaged in a fantasy, really trying to make sense of what has happened. And this is what children do when they don't, particularly when they don't have an understanding cognitively, their thinking skills aren't evolved enough, and they haven't been told enough or enough information or accurate information about what has happened. So they need to understand that irreversibility of the death. Also, the finality of the death, that the person not only is not coming back, but they're no longer alive. They're no longer human, really. Or if it's a pet, they're no longer a cat or a dog or a fish, a rabbit. They don't exist anymore. And that is a big concept. That's a huge kind of abstract concept, that something doesn't exist. It's not breathing, it's not feeling anything, it's not thinking anything. It's nothing, really. That is nothing in the way that we typically know people to be or animals to be. Nothing remains alive. You know, sometimes for children, they may think, some part of them is still alive in some way, and that's going to grow and they might come back. You know, you probably remember as a child making up all sorts of interesting things about the world around you. No different, of course, with a massive concept like death. You know, and it's not uncommon, particularly for young children who really struggle with that finality, and that person is no longer a person in the way that we understand it, to grasp all of that and to understand that they don't do the things that people do. They're no longer alive. They don't feel things. So sometimes a child may think, if we bury our little kitty in the backyard, the kitty's going to get cold in the ground. And of course they're not understanding that death means you don't feel anything, that there is nothing of that person or that animal to feel anything. I mean, I'm struggling to even articulate it properly. So imagine what that's like for a child. And that's okay if they don't understand it at that really early age. In time they will. And this is what I mean by grief being quite a complex process for children. And as they grow, particularly if they've had a loss, a significant loss when they're little, they would have a limited understanding of that. And as they grow and their brains develop and they have more ability to understand what that is, they will kind of continue to grieve, but in different ways, kind of with more depth and with more understanding. Oh, so when somebody is dead, that means they're not coming back, that they don't have a body anymore, that everything and everyone dies. You know, these kinds of bigger concepts start to become more understandable. And so they have to kind of rethink and re-grieve in a sort of a nuanced way that loss, because they're coming through it in a different way. Rather than us as adults, we already have that information. We're fully aware, as much as we can be, about death. So we don't have to go through all of that, whereas children do. Think about that. That's pretty big stuff, very big stuff. So I mentioned the universality of death as well. It's another big concept for children that children may struggle with, that everything and everyone dies. All the plants, all the animals, all the humans, you know, eventually the earth will die. Huge kind of concepts to grasp there. And also the notion of causality, what has caused a person to die. You know, and they're obviously older children might have a clearer understanding of that, particularly if somebody has been sick with a disease for a long time or really old. Again, the older a child is, the more they understand, say, if somebody has died in an accident in some way. And I'm just looking at a note. Then they will be able to sort of grasp the sort of the cause and effect in a more rational kind of way. Thank you, Kate. Kate has just popped on to say, when her daughter was about 3, her pet rabbit died, and we had to explain to her what had happened. We told her that the bunny had died and explained to her what it meant as best we could. Oh, brilliant. We then buried the rabbit in a place that she picked. Oh, that's really honouring. A few days later, we picked out a plant to plant on top of the spot where we buried the bunny, and let her know that the bunny would help the plant grow. Oh, that makes me feel really touched by that. I think that's so beautiful, Kate. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really like that you've explained that the bunny has died. You've said that word, even though her daughter was 3. You know, that's young. Never too young. Even a baby would have some understanding of death, particularly if it's a key figure. So talking about, say, the mother, a primary caregiver, you know, has died in their life. They would feel that on some level, of not to understand that. But I really liked, Kate, the way you've mentioned too, that you really involved your daughter in that process of naming the death, trying to explain it as best you could, burying a place that she picked, you know, and then and let her choose a plant and explain how the bunny would help the plant grow. You really, I think, really involving a child in that process as best you can, with the understanding of, well, the idea of what they can understand roughly, is really beautiful, and is really going to help that child come to terms with that loss and move through that grief in a more smoother way. I'm not going to say it in a quick way or a better way, you know, kind of thing, but it might be actually a little bit easier after the initial pain. You know, we can't escape from that, and that is why I was talking before about the importance of parents being able to work through their own stuff too, because if we're in a lot of denial or a huge amount of distress, that's going to tumble over into our children. On that note of pets, you know, I was reading some of Maggie Dent's stuff, information, an article she'd written about helping children cope with death and grief and loss. And one of her suggestions is to have pets, you know, to have little creatures that are going to die, because it does start to teach children about the concept of death and what that means, and then to experience sadness and grief and these things. It's sort of like preparing, and it sounds kind of morbid, but it's kind of like preparing the child, and perhaps you too, you know, for these inevitabilities of life, you know. And that's another big concept as well, of the notion of this is inevitable. You know, like I said, the universality of it. Everything and everyone is going to die, and sometimes they die way sooner than what we had hoped, and it's a very painful experience. Or somebody may have died in very painful or traumatic, a traumatic situation, which again, very much more harder to come to terms with. So I really want to encourage you to think about how you process and manage your own grief. I want to follow up again on what Kate said about the importance of presenting or talking in plain language, that we do not want to tell children, oh, Auntie Jo has gone to sleep and she's never waking up. I know it can be really tempting to do that, particularly if we're like, this is freaking me out and I'm really overwhelmed. But can you have a guess about why that might be problematic for a child? Or to say something like, well, Uncle Bob's just gone away for a very, very, very long time. Or, you know, these kinds of things that, or God took that person. They were so good and so loved that God came in and took them. And aside from what personal beliefs you may have in relation to spirituality and death, of course, there are cultural and religious considerations, which I mentioned before. But when we say these kind of euphemisms, oh, they just went to sleep, or they've just gone away, you know, we are denying that child the process and the right to grieve and the right to have the correct information, even if it's very minimal. Like what Kate said, the bunny has died, and try to just explain it in the bare, you know, you don't have to go 3-year-old, just kind of basic kind of information then. Bunny's heart has stopped beating, Bunny can't run around anymore, and Bunny's gone, you know, he's died, that's what happens. And you need to say those words, you need ideally to say death, and they've died, rather than causing potentially a fear or an anxiety or a phobia around going to sleep. Because if you said, oh, well, Auntie Jo went to sleep and she never woke up. If I heard that as a little person, I'd be like, well, I don't want to go to sleep, I'm going to die, you know, kind of thing. Or gone away, or God took them, and then it can be like this, oh my God, I have to be really good all the time, or am I going to be punished? And then if I'm punished, I'm going to die. You know, children do some crazy things in their minds, very normal. But if we don't give them the right information, that's going to make it much more harder for them to make sense of and understand. So we want to be as direct and clear as we can be in naming what has happened. Okay, I'm just going to briefly go through the rough kind of ages and stages of development and how a child might cope with grief at that age. Firstly, I just want to mention that certainly in the younger children, you might see behavioural regression. So whilst they might have trundled through the stages and maybe, fine with separating from you and have no problems with toileting or feeding or, they're not having tantrums and stuff like that. When there is a significant loss, you may see some of that going backwards. So sort of under the age of maybe 7, sometimes even older, sometimes even teenagers, sometimes even adults, we can regress to sort of old behaviours essentially when we're under stress, and grief is significant stress. Very young children too, if it's a significant caregiver and they don't have the understanding like we do as adults, they may feel abandoned. They may feel sad, absolutely, but feel like that person has left them. They may experience physical symptoms, may get very sick, tummy ache, headaches, strange pains, strange illnesses, quite common, quite normal. They may withdraw from the world. They may not do any of these things. Older children, you might start to see anxiety as well as sadness and withdrawal. They may also experience some physical problems. There may be some difficulties at school with behaviours or with learning or with friendship groups, or even at home, start to just get into conflict or want to isolate a lot. Teenagers may be different again, particularly if they're not coping well or if they don't have a good support system around them, may start to get into some risky behaviours, which obviously isn't ideal, and what they are saying is they need more support and more help to manage the grief. So I'm just going to break that up a little bit more. So starting from 0 to 3-year-olds, and I did mention that a baby would have a basic understanding of a loss if it was, a significant caregiver who was regularly in their life. They would notice on some level, certainly wouldn't have a thinking ability of this, but on some level and emotionally would detect an absence. Obviously, 0 to 3-year-olds would have a limited cognitive, thinking, understanding of what's happened. So, you would see more emotions and perhaps more behavioural things coming through. Remembering that children communicate primarily through their behaviour, regardless of what the issue is that they're dealing with. They don't have the ability to think and talk and articulate like we do as adults. So when you start to see some interesting behaviours, that's really an invitation for you to go, I wonder what's happening for my child. That's a general thing. But also, of course, can be overlaid when we're talking about grief and loss. Obviously, there might be things like crying, withdrawing, a lot of restlessness in that child. They may do things like look for substitutes. So, a different person, a different adult around them that they start to really attach themselves to, another pet, another animal, or a plant, or an object, or suddenly becoming very clingy to their little, teddy bear or soft toy or something like that. You may want to actually give them a new toy, a new soft toy to help soothe them. There's nothing wrong with that. To comfort them. There's also these things called sort of linking objects, which you can give to children. Doesn't matter sort of how young or old they are. And these would be things that we use as well. Photos of the deceased person, clothes, if it was someone very close to them, and their clothes might still have their smell, or if it was a regular piece of clothing that person wore, they'd be familiar with it sort of visually. If it was a pet, a collar. Recently, one of my cats died, very sadly. We've kept his collar and I've put it around his little urn, his little ashes. I've got a little paw print. These are all these are really important things, certainly for me, in commemorating and staying sort of connected to my cat, Ollie, and helps me grieve. I still feel sad and I still look at that sometimes and go, gosh, I really miss him. why did this happen? Those kinds of things. It's no different for children. That's very helpful for adults, and those things can be very helpful for children too. Smells, perfumes, kind of thing. Music, maybe they had a favourite song that they used to sing with grandpa, kind of thing, and you could sing it too. I know that might be really difficult and painful, but it can be sort of a useful, if it is useful, it may not be, a useful thing to help the little person stay a bit connected to their uncle, their grandparent, whoever it is that has passed away. Helps them to feel close to them, preserve some memories. 4 to 7 year olds, so moving on now, they can understand now the concept of no more, that something has finished, kind of thing. They have much more of an understanding of that. They may be interested in the body, they may ask questions, pretty obvious, kind of questions. What's happened? So when grandma dies, what's happening to her body, kind of thing. Really kind of normal, curious questions that you may have to, depending on the age of the child and what you're comfortable with, talk to them about. Well, their body isn't breathing anymore, and the heart's not beating anymore. And what we do with bodies when they've died, depending on what's happening, we might cremate them or bury them. And then you would have to talk about what cremation is. You want to be just very mindful, though, of what that child can understand, and of not traumatizing that child too much with too much information that may be quite overwhelming, particularly in terms of cremation, to explain that a body is put in a big oven, essentially. That may be like, what, kind of thing. Or for some children that may be fine, if they're pet and they come back as ashes. That's a really trippy kind of concept, though, to understand as well. And over time, like I've said, they will understand that. They might understand it at the age of 5, but they will understand it at 10 and be able to kind of assimilate that more and be less kind of overwhelmed by that. Children in this kind of 4 to 7 age bracket would have a better understanding too that people die for many different reasons, and so are probably less likely to think, I've done something wrong. They may still do, though. So what that means, no matter what, is to talk to your child about what they understand death to be. Like many of the sort of taboo subjects that we sometimes don't want to talk about with our children, they probably already do have some sort of understanding and awareness, and it's up to us to go, what do you understand about death? What do you think happens? Or do you have any questions about that? Because then when you know what they know, then you can kind of fill in the gaps or sort out the information for them or correct them if they've got some understanding that is wrong or is causing them distress. Be quite clear at this age. They will probably understand what has happened. They may be feeling guilt, though, and sort of believing that they've had some part in it. So again, talking to them about what has happened and their understanding of that is really important. Moving on to the 7 to 11 age bracket, certainly a lot more thinking ability in this age bracket. They may want a lot of details. What's happened, why it's happened, when, how, who, these kinds of things. They can understand disease, accidents, these kinds of things. They're probably fully aware of that. They're also capable of experiencing some pretty strong adult emotions at this age, even though you might not necessarily see a lot of that generally because they're busy at this age, being busy and doing kind of kid things. But they may experience, the usual stuff: sadness, guilt, anger, longing for that person. If they're experiencing things like anger, this can be really confusing for them. Why am I feeling so angry that this person has died? Anger is a really common response to grief, particularly when somebody has died. I think anger in general, that can come up when we've had a loss, and a loss and a death is something that is so beyond our control. We couldn't have stopped it. That little person couldn't have stopped that person dying. They feel angry about it, but it's like, oh, I also feel sad about it, but I feel angry. I don't want to be angry at this person. Why am I angry? So we really need to help them sort out those feelings, normalize them, validate them for them, let them have them, let them express them. Incredibly important for children. Invite the child to express their feelings. Some children may look like they're fine, maybe just getting on with their daily life. Need to still, hang out with my friends and do my little tasks at school. Maybe quite preoccupied with that. And admittedly for some parents that might be, I'm relieved, they seem like they're fine. I can guarantee though that inside they would be grieving. And this is just their way. They're just sticking to kind of what they know. And on that notion, sometimes having a routine can be really helpful as well, as best you're able to sort of keep that up. It's up to, ask them whether they would like to go to school or daycare or not. Some may want to do that, some may not want to do that. Be mindful too that they might be trying to please you at this time, so that's kind of a tricky one to work out. Teenagers, poor buggers, are already really emotional and experiencing a lot of crazy feelings, a lot of hormones. We all know what teenagers struggle through. We've been through that ourselves, so grieving as a teenager may be even more challenging because they're already developmentally going through an awful lot of stuff. How they grieve may really alter, or what has happened to them may really alter the way they see the world. Teenagers, we're certainly getting into the mid-teens, really early to mid-teens, I should say, really able to understand and be really thinking through some heavy-duty concepts. Some ethical dilemmas, values, morals. They'd be starting to go, what is this world? What is the point of life? And I'm not necessarily talking about being suicidal or self-harming, but really starting to comprehend what life is about and trying to make sense of that. And then, of course, now they've got a loss or a death that has occurred, even bigger kind of stuff to go, what is happening? And being confronted with certain facts of life, certain inevitabilities, that sometimes things in life happen that are horrible and that are unfair, and this is just life. The challenge is to make it through that and certainly support that teenager through that. Teens may try to intellectualize it, have a lot of thinking around it as a way perhaps to avoid, adults do that a lot as well, as a way to avoid the feeling kind of stuff, maybe just kind of all stuck up in their head. Remembering that teenagers already operate, I have a teenager, so that's why I'm kind of chuckling. Teenagers already kind of operate on two parallel levels, right? So there's the outside teen that we see out in the world doing their thing, kind of living their normal kind of life, going to school, doing this stuff. But then they have sort of like a secret hidden inner world, which is undergoing huge transformation, forming their identity. What am I doing with my life and the world? Who are my friends? Who am I? Big questions. Separating a bit from parents. Big stuff. And so in that kind of hidden space, that's where they may be holding a lot of their grief and loss. A lot of dark thoughts might be creeping in there. They may look like they're like, I'm just ticking along, I'm just trucking along with my life. But there may be some more, certainly deeper things in terms of grief that they're just trying to conceal. Give teenagers as much free rein as you can to express themselves, however that may be. Keeping in mind too that, when you're a teenager, your peers are very, very important to you and fitting in. Well, this kind of strange paradox of I want to be myself, but I want to fit in as well. And they may not want to seem weak in front of their peers, or they may not want to seem different if they've lost a parent or had to move away. That's a real threat to their sort of identity and being in this little social circle. So they may kind of really try to hide that and cover it up and go, no, I'm fine. There's no dramas. I don't want to talk about it kind of thing. Let's just get on with it. That's kind of normal in a way. You do need to encourage your teen in their own way, perhaps in a private way, quietly with you perhaps, or whoever they really trust and are close to in their lives, to still feel and express their feelings as best they can, perhaps away from their friends, or they might actually have a really close friend that they can go there with. You might, if that is the case, you might want to be certainly talking to some of the other parents or the school if somebody in their family has died. Teenagers too may repress feelings and sort of want to just delay their mourning. This may occur, that may go on for a few years, but it's going to have to come out at some point, and that may well be as an adult. Maybe you've had that experience yourself. Grieving can take a truckload of emotional energy. If you've had a loss in your life, you know how it just sort of, I'm going to say, sucks the life out of you. Pardon the pun, but it's a very intense, heavy feeling for some people, and sort of emotionally in your head, you're going through so much, it's very hard to engage in your regular life. So certainly for some children and teenagers, they may want to go to school and keep up their activities and see friends. Other kids won't want to do that, or they may have to and find that they cannot do their schoolwork, they just can't concentrate, or they lose interest in going to school or lose interest in the things they used to really love. This is all quite normal. This is what adults experience too. There's this kind of loss of meaning for many things in their life because of this one big event, and then suddenly the bottom drops out of everything, and it might just be that way for a little way or for a long time. And you have to support that child or teenager to stay afloat enough. We don't want them to experience more losses because their grief was not managed so well, and they've fallen behind at school, and then they've lost these friends, and then suddenly everything's kind of blowing up in their world. What else have I written here? So don't judge teenagers for how they are handling things. They're going through their own stuff in their own way. Tread carefully when you wanting to support them, but make sure they know that you are there no matter what, and no matter what you are feeling as well, that they can lean on you. Teenagers really need to know that. Children need to know that especially, but teenagers, sometimes they can have this really icky relationship with their parents. And if, and it can be difficult for them, particularly if they suddenly do regress a little bit. They might then want to actually go back into the arms of their parents and get really close and not want to leave the house. That's okay as well. That's their process, and you have to work through that if that is challenging for you to support them. Okay, so I'm going to now, what have we got? About 20 minutes. So I'm going to go through some a bit more stuff now from the wonderful Maggie Dent, parenting goddess extraordinaire. She's just fabulous. I love her stuff. She's got some fantastic stuff on her website, a couple of really good articles that I have some information from, and I will link to them on our website and put a link to this live stream video as well. So grief and loss, a death particularly, or major loss, huge stress. One of the biggest stresses a child, a teenager, or an adult will ever experience. And when we think about stress, I'm not just talking about in your head, I'm talking about massive, potentially body stress, emotional stress, even sort of spiritual stress that you're going through at that time. She's got some little tips here on how to prepare a child for a loss. So this is obviously applicable, say, if you are moving house, parents are divorcing and there's sort of plans being made, or somebody is really ill in their family or in their close network, and there's an inevitability that they are going to die. So avoid trying to overprotect children or kind of do the cotton wool around them too much. I know it's really tempting as a parent to want to protect our children from all the yucky stuff in the world, all the bad feelings, all the bad experiences. That is not going to help them when they're an adult. Okay, so they're going to experience stuff, we're going to experience stuff. The best thing you can do, you don't want to just drop them in there, you don't want to go from one extreme to the other, but they need to have practice and an experience of some of the difficult things in life, and they need to have an experience of being supported and helped through that. So don't kind of mollycoddle them too much and saying, oh, it's going to be all right. It's not going to be all right. Grandpa is dying, and okay, he might be better when he's dead, if they can understand that notion, and if that's what you believe, it's kind of tricky there. dismissing a child's feelings or dismissing the reality of what's happening, possibly one of the worst things you can do, because it creates an intense confusion and leaves that child in a place of being unable to work out what has happened. I'm just going to respond to someone else here. Tony, do you think if you miss out as a child, you feel those feelings as an adult? Tony, do you mean if you miss out feeling the grief as a child, if something happened to you as a child and you weren't able to sort of grieve that, then you feel those feelings as an adult? Is that what you are meaning? I'll just wait for Tony to reply. I think that's what she's meaning. Thank you so much, Tony, for jumping on and asking me a question. Yes. Yes, I do. So she's saying, do you think if you miss out as a child, so miss grieving as a feelings, you feel those feelings as an adult? Absolutely. Because where do they go? They're still feelings. They would be tucked away somewhere inside of you, somewhere in the back of your heart or mind or subconscious, your soul on some level, and they need to be processed. I love this quote that I've stuck up in my house. I saw this recently. Healing means feeling. So you have to feel the stuff that you weren't able to feel as a child, whether that was a grief or a loss or a trauma that happened or any kind of, any difficulty that happened as a child. If you weren't able to feel those feelings because you weren't supported in that, or you didn't want to feel that, or many different reasons why that happens, it doesn't mean the feelings go away. It doesn't mean the feelings go away. They just kind of get shut away. And one day they're going to come knocking. And that's why therapists are in work. Shouldn't laugh about that, because that's one of the worst experiences ever. I've experienced that too. I know what that's like. Tony says again, I've never experienced a death that I can comprehend when I was a child, but not when someone passes away. It's all weird, unknown emotions now being an adult. I've never experienced a death that I can comprehend when I was a child. Okay. But not when someone passes away. Look, it is all weird, unknown emotions. And just thinking about that as a child, if it's kind of weird and unknown now, how weird and unknown is it when you're a child going through that? And hence the importance of some adult or adults around them helping make sense of the damn weirdness that is death. And the complexity of the emotions, like you're saying, Tony, the unknown emotions. And particularly if if an adult, you find that when you were a child, you weren't coached in your emotions or your feelings very well. So what I mean by that, often in schools these days, they teach children about their feelings. They're really, upfront about them, to say, oh, you're feeling sad and this is what it may look like or feel like. If you didn't have those experiences as a child, it may be really difficult for you to name feelings, or you might be feeling something in your body or in your heart or in your head, many different places to feel a feeling, and be quite confused by it. And of course, when we have death coming along and all the complexities, the confusion of that, why did it happen? Who did it happen to, under what circumstances? Grappling perhaps with the unfairness of things, or the finality of things, wanting to deny things, feeling angry, feeling guilty, feeling sad. That's a washing machine of emotions. And you're just in it, and the more you fight it, or the more, say, a child is fighting that or is not supported through that, the more difficult it is. Oh, you now have a Bachelor of Science in Psychology and think about everything. I can totally relate, Tony. Having gone through psychology studies, you kind of think it changes the way you think about many things in the world. That's really good. Way to go. I hope you really enjoyed it. You probably do think a lot now about things in a completely different way. Good on you. My grandpa passed away when I was 7. Never thought about it till late teens. Or now as an adult, 27 years old, it's like everything reminds me of him. Oh, Tony, that must be really hard. I really feel for you. I'd be curious. I'm not going to go into too much detail right now, but I'd be curious about how you were supported when you were 7 in coping with your grandfather's death. never thought about it. I'm like, oh, that's interesting, and yet here it is sort of now, and it's like everything reminds you of him, which tells me that it's saying you need to grieve me, or grief really never ends. When we are at a place where we can think about, remember a person or a memory that was particularly difficult and painful, but we're able to just think about it and kind of reflect on it and not have really strong emotional responses, we would say that's probably been quite well processed and integrated, okay, psychologically speaking. But when, there's some interesting topics here, when we haven't been able to grieve sort of properly, I would say, then we're still really triggered, perhaps is the word to use, and are reminded of things a lot. If we're thinking about something like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, separate to grief, can be some of that in there too. No, Tony, don't be bothered. It's so great to have people interacting, honestly. This is like the first time. We've had the odd colleague, person at work here go, hey, so I'm really excited that Kate and Tony are chatting here. This is fantastic, because this is what we want with the interaction. What was I talking about? Being triggered, kind of thing, and then having things come up and the memories and the feelings and thinking like everything's reminding me of them. I think that's suggesting that there's perhaps some more work to do around that grief. And just because you were 7 and that was 20 years ago, it doesn't matter how long ago it was. Kate is saying, I was brought up with very English parents who had a stiff upper lip. Was pretty hard being an emotional child, and still is. Yes, it is. That would be very hard, because that stiff upper lip is kind of a denial of feelings, really, of quite an invalidating or dismissive approach to life's difficulties and all the emotions that we feel and all the crap that happens to us in life. And that stiff upper lip, I think, is a coping mechanism, and it probably works to a degree to keep going, to just kind of power through things, but really you're using a bulldozer to just bulldoze your way through really difficult stuff, rather than being able to sit with it and feel it. Completely the opposite. Tony saying it was like hidden from me that when she was 7 and her grandfather died, and she sort of thought about it for another 20 years. But exactly, and that's exactly what I'm encouraging people not to do, to not hide the death of someone or something from that little person, because it's happened to that person as well, that little child, and they need to go through that as well. Otherwise it will drag out the mourning or the grief, or it will suddenly pop up 20 years later. Here you are doing a psych degree, or Kate has just done a Bachelor of Counselling. Let me tell you, I've been there too. I've done those degrees, and all this stuff comes out. Or when you go to counselling and therapy, because you're like, why am I suddenly feeling really emotional, or really something? And suddenly this wave of memories and feelings come up, because they have to come up and be processed. So the more we're able to support children so that they don't struggle and carry around these like little lead balloons of grief, the better it is. Oh, it's so sweet. Tony saying he was crazy about me when he was her best friend. He used to take me from my mum and call me his child. So you sound like you were close to your grandfather, and he was really close to you and cherished you, and then he dies and then it's hidden from you. This is kind of the opposite of what we would really want. How difficult for you to go through that. And she's saying, oh, you're not feeling really good. Went through a lot of mental and emotional abuse from an ex-stepdad, and I felt like I'm a guardian. Your guardian disappeared, so you must have felt like you've just been left alone. I think that's what you're saying. Certainly having a difficult experience with that stepfather in your life there, and not having someone safe around you to protect you from difficult experiences and difficult people, or to help you process events in your life like grief and loss. Thank you guys for chatting. Like I said, it's very exciting. And I'm really pleased people are talking about this topic as well, because it can be really sad. You know, I certainly felt teary reading some of this stuff. That's okay. You know, I'm human at the end of the day. I feel a lot of different things, a lot of emotions every day kind of thing. I told my mum it would be different if he was alive. Yeah, for sure. So I think you're saying, Tony, that experience of your relationship, that difficult relationship with your stepfather would be different if your grandfather had still been alive. I'm sure it would have been, and perhaps he wouldn't have tolerated what went on and would have been very protective and supportive of you, and you didn't have that. And that's a huge loss, let alone to not understand or be told what has happened to your grandfather, and now suddenly having this quite opposite experience with a different male in your life. A lot of stuff there. Thank you. Just quickly, preparing children for loss. Like I said, avoid overprotecting them. That's that kind of stiff upper lip thing that Kay was talking about. If you've got a few children, if you have more than one child, learn, you probably already know they have different personalities, different ways of handling things. Sort of learn what works for them, what helps to reassure and support and soothe them. Reading stories to children, finding books, finding YouTube clips out there, whether you're preparing for a death or a death has occurred. Books are a really great way, especially for children, to help make sense of what's happened, and that's a great little bonding activity that you can do between you and your child. Also talking about other sad events that they may see or experience in life. They may see something on TV or somebody else is sad, so talking them through those feelings as well. It's kind of helping them prepare for things and helping them, you know, in terms of validating their emotional world. Tony's saying she's been working with children for 12 years. Wow. Different mental, emotional and special needs and regular kind of normal kids. I have a drive to keep children safe and honest. I'm sure you do, given what you have mentioned, and that is beautiful. You're one of these angels on earth now, helping to protect other vulnerable children. That is just so wonderful, Tony. Thank you so much for doing that. I'm sure you've made a huge difference in the lives of many children and many people who know you as well. It sounds like you have a big heart, and you've been able to use some of your difficult experiences to help other people. That is just wonderful. You sound really kind. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for sharing that. Just before I wrap up, sort of managed to go on and on and on a lot today. I just want to talk about quickly how to support children if a loss or a death has occurred. Keeping up a bit of a regular routine as best you can. Seeing how the rest of the family is coping, because that would be rubbing off on that child. Letting the child or the children have still lots of rest, sleep, good nutrition, the standard kinds of things. Try not to drop the ball too much on that. Ensure that they have their regular comforts and soothing things around them, whether that's certain toys or certain people. Make sure they're always with them. Like I mentioned way back earlier on, maybe find a new toy for them, especially for that occasion. Keep them informed as much as you can. Be honest and upfront without going into too much detail, depending on their age, checking what they already understand. Surround them with love and lots of people, like I mentioned right at the beginning, that are important to them, that are supportive, that are safe and trustworthy. We really want that for you as well as an adult, as well as for that little person. Considering bunkering down for a few days or weeks particularly after a death, where everyone's probably going to be pinging off the walls trying to make sense of what's happened. That reminds me of when you have a newborn baby and you've just kind of got to bunker down for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, few months, because you're in a different land. That's okay. Let the tears, let the feelings feel and happen, and still try to keep up some pretty regular things. If they want to still go to school or daycare or whatever, let them do that. Safe, soothing touch and distraction with favourite games, DVDs, these kinds of things. Avoid taking them away from key carers, key people in their life in the first first few days there. We want to keep things pretty stable as much as we can. Try to allow rather than squash emotions. I've been talking a lot about that. Children like to be able to help, sometimes keeping busy, helping you still cook and, I don't know, clean the house or feed the little pet bunny, you know, whatever. Things that helps them to feel useful and not so kind of helpless amongst all the grief, particularly if there's a lot of grief being experienced in the house. And be aware, like I mentioned too, of some regression in behaviours. Separation anxiety may return, bedwetting may return, being clingy, being really upset really easily. All these things may come back. Do not panic. It won't be forever. See it as quite a normal, oh, she's going to bed. Thank you for everything. Feel free to add me as a friend or message me. Sure, Tony. Yeah. Or follow and like our page or friend us. We will do that. Absolutely. Thank you so much for contributing. Honestly, really grateful to have 2 people talking today. I hope you get some good sleep. What else might help? Well, to be mindful of that suppressing emotion in children can come out in inappropriate behaviours. This is why we really want to encourage children to feel all their feelings as best they can. So we might see sort of some of that fight or flight response going on in children of freezing or fighting or numbing themselves because they're very traumatized. There might be an explosion of tantrums going on. Shock and making a child feel like they're not in their body anymore. Perhaps you've had that experience as an adult. What that is saying is that whatever you're experiencing at that moment emotionally and psychologically is so overwhelming that you leave your body in a way. That may happen for children as well. If that has happened, or if you've noticed that's happened, or they're talking about I'm not really feeling like I'm in my body and I don't know what's happening, or I'm looking outside of my body onto things and that goes on, I would consider getting some professional help for that, because it may indicate that they're significantly struggling. They may have some pretty irrational fears, like I mentioned. I mentioned in terms of not saying, say, grandpa's gone to sleep forever. But even if you've tried to be pretty upfront with them about what's happened, they may still think, is everyone around me going to die now? Are they going to die now? You know, stuff that we know is not true, but for them, perfectly valid to think these things. Children need a lot of reassurance and support. Without that, they can become oversensitive to stress responses. So, you know, perhaps they used to be quite resilient, be able to sort of cope with daily sort of ups and downs, and now suddenly they can't cope with that stuff at all. So we need to support them and soothe them to get their endorphins going and bring down some of their cortisol levels, their stress hormone levels. Again, talking to that child to see what their understanding is, to be mindful that they might be blaming themselves in some ways. We really want to get to the bottom of that and help children not blame themselves for a loss or a change, a death, a divorce, things like that. If a parent goes to prison, you know, sometimes they may try to, I did something wrong and now my parent's being punished for it. So what helps? Babies and toddlers, the younger children, a lot of soothing, physical touch, a lot of stroking, warmth, some movement, some rocking, you know, wrapping them up. Pets can be a great source of comfort. She's got some techniques listed here that you need to read a bit more about that, but there's some techniques around head holding and touching and some tapping, some eye stuff, some neuro-linguistic programming. I know I'm rushing a little bit here. That familiar piece of clothing can be very comforting, particularly if it's from a person very close to them. Again, nutrition, fluids, that kind of standard stuff. Avoid talking too much. Ironic because I'm talking a lot today. Asking too many questions and doing too much. Slipping into that busy mode because you don't want to feel all the difficult feelings that you may be feeling. I'm thinking a lot too of teenagers. Often they don't want to be talked to a lot. They get sick of all the questions. Just being there, just really making sure that your presence is known and you're supportive, and just offering the odd word of comfort or odd question, checking in, that kind of thing, and just making sure they've got what they need that typically supports them. Really important. Young children, you may want to help them visualize a safe place in their head. There's lots of little techniques and visualizations that you can do that is very comforting. You might want to help them be involved in the funeral, that process, or if it is a change or loss, moving away or something like that, help them be part of, so packing up, have a little ritual around saying goodbye to the house, or if they're coming to the funeral, help them understand what that funeral is about as best they can, but sort of be part of that. If grandpa had favourite chocolates or favourite something, that your child can bring along to make that sort of final journey special. Really invite them into the ceremony and the rituals that we have around death, and that we often don't have around significant changes of events, but there's a closure, so we need to help us as adults, but that little person as well, close that symbolically. If they are moving from their house, they might like to say goodbye house, kind of thing, thank you for being my house, or whatever. Or if the family has divorced, there would be perhaps some other things that you could do there, which I won't go into right now. And just remember to speak as best you can, really positively and kindly and with love about the person who has died, if we're talking about death, so that they hold them. They're like, no, I can remember, grandma was really friendly with me. Like what Tony has just mentioned here today, that she's got some really fond memories of her grandfather, so we would really want to remind children of those wonderful things. And when we love, when we have connections to people, it does hurt when they leave our lives, or when things change in our lives, and that's the beauty of life as a whole. It is a cycle, as you know. And finally, other things that can help, just quickly, validation of grief, of the feelings, particularly the older the child or the teenager, saying, everyone grieves in their own way. There is no one way, there's no right or wrong way. There are ways that can be, like I mentioned before, more problematic over the long term if you don't grieve. You can develop some complex grief or some associated depression, but not always. Be really non-judgmental, give them unconditional support and love. Make sure you've got that good support network around them of family, friends, trusted and safe people. Having that sort of what Maggie Dent calls a lighthouse person who's always there for them, whether that's you or someone else in their lives. Help them create some good memories of that person who's gone. Give them opportunities to be messengers of hope. Promote help-seeking behaviours, particularly older children and teenagers. Tell them where to get help if they don't want to come to you. Hey, you can go online to Kids Helpline, or you can call them, you can text them. There's Headspace, there's Youth Focus, there's many different organisations. Find them and just have that information there and encourage them to seek help. If not from you, someone else. If they don't want to come to you, at least they're going to someone else. Certainly have that there. And help them work out constructive ways of honouring the deceased person. That might be through art or through music or nature or creating an online memorial, little video kind of thing. There's many, many different ways there. So I've gone over time, but that's okay, because this is a very full topic. There's many different layers to it. I'm really grateful that you've given the time to watch and listen to this. I'm really grateful for the interaction we've had today. By all means, come back again next week and interact. Next week I'm live streaming on what happens to the mothers and the caregivers who've done a lot of holding and supporting of other people during the pandemic. When everything goes back to normal, do we all start falling apart now, and what that's about and how to manage that. So kind of changing tack a bit. But I'm going to wrap it up now. If you have any more questions or you'd like to make contact with us, our website, whws.org.au, of course our Facebook page, send us a message, call us 9490 2258. email us, info@whws.org.au. Many ways to communicate to us. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next week. Bye.